Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Paul Rose and this presentation explains how to welfare score captive Anseriformes, geese, ducks, swans and screamers using a method developed by myself and a colleague of mine from the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust that's published in the journal Animals. This presentation explains the background to the welfare scoring method, how to do it in practice, and outlines the key examples of welfare scoring documented in this paper. The paper can be found on the Animals website and is open access and free to read. The end part of this presentation explains the content of the paper. The middle part of this presentation explains the welfare scoring toolkit that can be accessed as an appendix to the paper. Ducks, geese and swans are some of the most common of all captive species. These are mandarins and wood ducks, some of the most popular of birds in private aviculture too. The screamers are more specialised in their requirements and less commonly seen, but because of their ancestral relationship to the wildfowl, this scoring method also works for them too. The ducks in this video are in molt. They're going into their eclipse plumage, which is where, over summer, after breeding, drakes look tatty and scruffy and lose their bright colours. This welfare scoring system, outlined in this paper, takes into account these particular characteristics that are specific to the wildfowl, so that a welfare score is holistic for all of the bird's features as well as for its environment too. The welfare scoring system contains a mixture of questions that relate to animal-based and resource-based welfare measures. Animal-based measures might be the personality of the animals, their behavioural expression, how they are interacting with one another and their environment. These provide us with an understanding of how that individual is dealing with the current environment and how the resources that it provided with are affecting its own level of mental welfare. Animal-based measures are more difficult to quantify, but this provides us with an attempt at understanding personality and behavioural expression characteristics of the birds that might be useful to compare at a later date. Resource-based welfare measures concern what the animal is provided with: shelter, food, water, the way in which the animal engages with the things around it. For example, these two screamers in this photo are building a nest from the nesting material they are provided with. The nesting material is a resource that the bird is engaged with, and therefore we can see from its behaviours that hopefully its welfare is positive. The article is available free to read in full, fully open access in the journal Animals. Search for Anseriformes and welfare and you'll find the paper. On the paper's page, you will find options to view the full text as an HTML, download it as a PDF, as well as browse individual figures. There is a simple summary and an abstract which provides an overall picture of what the paper contains. There is also a video abstract which explains the key points of the paper visually. Beneath the video abstract, under supplementary material, you will find the actual welfare scoring toolkit, i.e. the sheet that we have designed that will allow you to go and welfare assess your birds. I'm going to download and open this document to show you what it looks like. The welfare scoring system starts by allowing you to score the physical features of the bird. You can score whether or not visitors or other people are present around the bird if that is relevant to your animal collection. You should also state the individual or group identifier of the bird that you are scoring, i.e. a leg ring. The physical features of the bird can be matched to where it is in the enclosure, for example on land or in water, with others or alone. You can then give an idea of its plumage condition, body condition, as well as its ease of movement. Most importantly, particularly for ducks, we should consider whether or not the bird is in eclipse, and for all species of wildfowl, is the bird in molt, because obviously activity patterns in and out of molt, as well as physical appearance, change markedly for wildfowl. We then have a section that allows you to score the bird's basic state behaviours. State behaviours are those long duration behaviours that we can measure as a moment of time. In this case, we're simply identifying the type of state behaviour that you have seen. We can then compare this to other descriptors further on down, as well as the time of year or season, to give an idea of the normality of the bird's behaviour pattern. Animal features are the next part of the paper. This is where you can score the personality or behavioural expression of the bird. We give a range of personality descriptors and the ability to score those that you can see from 0 to 100. Ideally, you should do this over time and then compare personality to behaviour to season and time of year to see what is expected of that individual at that particular time. Any deviation away from personality in that particular individual, anything that might be unusual or abnormal for that particular time or season, can then be investigated further. We've also given you the means to score the personality or behavioural expression of the group overall and compare that to other environmental variables. The last part of the welfare scoring methods looks at the enclosure features itself. Can you score the appropriateness of the husbandry for the species you're observing? Is the species housed in a single taxa or mixed taxa exhibit? Are there other feral species around the bird? And how do they impact on its welfare state? These are obviously, in this example, species that are European, but we can change that based on where the welfare scoring system is occurring. We also score different aspects of the bird's life stage, i.e. where is it being housed and with whom? Is that relevant to its particular life stage? As well as key features of the enclosure itself. Is it an open-topped enclosure or a covered aviary? And is the bird pinioned or feather trimmed? Because obviously that will impact on its behaviour. The style of the enclosure will also impact on the type of native birds that can access the exhibit too. Then there is a section on particular aspects of the enclosure features that might be relevant to particular species. Access to perching or shelter, substrate for long-legged species, water depth for diving species, access to grazing. Specifically for some birds that need to be kept in social groups to reduce competition or reduce stress on females from males, we've given the opportunity to score whether or not the social group is relevant to the species and whether or not the sex ratio is important and relevant to the species too. You can also score how easily the bird can get in and out of the water, as well as the cleanliness of the enclosure and if there are areas of clean, dry ground for the bird to access. You can score feeding, the condition and quality of the water, and finally, at the bottom of the paper, there is a chance for you to check how you are completing the assessment based on the explanatory notes we have provided. Clear instruction that allows you to fill in each part of the welfare scoring system in a correct and valid manner for the individual. We have given information on behavioural descriptors of personality, so your descriptors of personality can be consistent for all those scoring for that bird, as well as examples of state behaviours too. Personality and state behaviour are all explained so you can follow each area of the welfare scoring method to ensure it's repeatable across all observers. Of course, behaviour is not the only thing to consider when we're welfare scoring. Whilst observation of animal behaviour can tell us something about how an individual is coping or feeling, we need to remember that many species of wild animal, when housed in captivity, will hide signs of distress or illness. Therefore, we should also consider personality and individual behavioural expression. These can tell us a lot about how well an individual is coping with its current situation. This is my female mandarin. She's incredibly inquisitive, she's very bold, and she likes to explore the features of her environment. Any change in these underlying personality traits would give me an early warning that maybe something was not quite right with her, and I would step in and look a little bit deeper. Likewise, this is Bruce, my red-breasted goose. Bruce is a relatively old bird. He's about 15 years old, but he still thrives and still behaves as other red-breasted geese should do. He looks a little bit scruffy in this photo, but again he's going through the molts. So we check his personality, we look at the behaviours he's performing, we check his physical health, and we check his plumage condition, and we put all of that together into a complete picture of his current welfare state. These birds are alert and interested. Watch them react to the passing over of a helicopter. Key behavioural features tell us a lot about how birds respond to their environment. If we now go back to the actual paper, this provides the outline supporting information for how we have designed the welfare scoring method. I will now download the PDF of the actual paper and go through it briefly so you can see how it links to the welfare scoring. The introduction to the paper sets the scene for why the introduction to the paper sets the scene for why this welfare scoring method is needed. The introduction provides an explanation of why welfare scoring is performed in zoos, the difference between resource-based and animal-based approaches, and how these are relevant to Anseriformes. We explain the aims of the scoring system, and then we go into some key areas of terminology which might be relevant to those wanting to know more about how welfare scoring fits into the aims and objectives of the modern animal collection. We discussed the need to provide evidence for management of key Anseriform species, and we provide an explanation of some contentious areas of husbandry, for example, flight restraint. We have provided examples of how different species might be affected by flight restraint in different ways and how this might link to their welfare experience. We have then supported that with evidence that we have taken from the literature, which shows why the wild ecology of these birds can be used for determining their welfare experience in captivity. Here is the table on the different ecological characteristics of particular species and how they might fare when flight restrained. We then explain why we need evidence for all areas of management and how the welfare toolkit helps us gather that evidence. The final part of the paper explains some statistical analysis that can be run on the welfare scoring methods. This is particularly relevant to those in a large zoological collection that might have research students that could do the welfare scoring and then compare the scores taken from individuals over time. The statistical analysis part of the paper is less relevant to the private keeper, but it still might be interesting or informative for those that want to know more about how to take welfare scoring data forward and what to do with welfare scoring data. We provide some examples of how to score for personality using a principal components analysis, and therefore how we compare the outcome of scoring of personality over time to see seasonal or temporal effects on individual bird personality. We provide a cycle for how to implement changes from the welfare audit itself, how to observe birds under existing conditions, how to use and review those welfare scoring data with all stakeholders, how to then implement change to husbandry practice, how to re-evaluate and re-perform the welfare audit and ensure this is a cyclical process. Remember, it's no good just to do a welfare score once. This has to be a continual cycle to check that husbandry and management are always relevant to the bird's needs. We also have an example of how to conduct the welfare assessment of a sample species. This has been explained in depth in the presentation. And the end of the paper explains some examples of key enclosure features that are relevant to particular groups of Anseriformes. And therefore, we finish by bringing all of this together to explain how the resource-based and animal-based approaches provide a complete and holistic way of scoring welfare for ducks, geese, swans and screamers in the zoo as well as in the private collection. A key aim of this paper is to explain why welfare auditing is important and how this method helps you score the welfare experience of individual birds in your collection, be that a zoo collection or a private collection. Welfare scores are taken from individual birds by trained members of staff. Identify areas of welfare challenge for improvement and identify positive aspects of husbandry to build on, as these positive aspects clearly enhance the welfare state of the individual birds in the collection. If we follow this flowchart from the areas for improvement to start with, and we're looking particularly at whistling ducks, which are a perching species, we can use key features of their natural ecology to help us understand any welfare infringements. Perhaps there is bullying or domination of preferred areas of perching, and perhaps wild birds are going into the exhibit using these resources instead of the intended inhabitants of the exhibit. To combat this, we could rearrange the perching and increase the number of such valuable resources. We could potentially remove perches that are unused by the zoo birds and place them in different areas of the enclosure to restrict or remove access from feral birds that are taking over this resource. We then reassess the welfare of the birds, i.e. the whistling ducks, and we re-evaluate any changes in perching on bird behavioural expression, the personality characteristics of the bird, which tells us about their interactions with the environment. If we then look at identifying positive aspects of husbandry, the enclosure size perhaps allows for appropriate social grouping to be housed. This might be a larger expansive enclosure, which enables a range of individual whistling ducks of different demographics to be housed, and these are highly social birds, so a complex social environment is enabled to be facilitated. We then introduce new individuals to provide new social opportunities for all birds, and consequently, this direct intervention, which enables movement around individuals in the group, allows for improved social cohesion and hence an improved welfare state for all birds. But ultimately, these both then feed back into this continual cycle of welfare measurement and welfare auditing. We don't just do a welfare audit once and then finish. We must remember that welfare auditing is a cyclical process. We're always looking at areas for improvement, and we're always building on our key areas of good practice. And that's why evaluation of these animal-based and resource-based measures is so useful.